Hey, all you handsome chaps and you beautiful birds. This is another episode of this incredibly low budget podcast called Out of Pop Culture Bounds. I am your host. Let's just call me Chris. And today we had, today I brought back to the airport some friends that we had from Chicago came in to visit. Very awesome people. Had a great time. Two very wonderful daughters, one being 10, the other one being 7, and had a great time with them. I mean, we did, I can't tell you exactly what we did, but because, got to have some anonymity and privacy and such. But we had a great time. We had a wonderful time doing all kinds of fun things, and um, the girls are very well behaved. As kids can be, they can be a little bit whiny, and I don't want to do this, I don't want to watch that, and whatever. But I mean, that's fine. That's how kids are, and that's totally cool. Um, and when it comes to dinner time with children, it's kind of funny to me that I've seen so many friends and their children. Because most of my friends started having kids when they were not older. I don't want to say older, but my daughter was born when I was 28, and a lot of my friends started having kids when they were like 35, 36, 37. And not there's anything wrong with that, but it's just so funny to see how different it is. And I see my friends with their kids and meals and such. It's like, oh yeah, well here, we made this for dinner. I made that for dinner. Whoever made whatever for dinner, the mom, the dad, friends, whoever. And a kid might say like, well, I really don't want this. And then the mom or dad will be like, oh, okay, well then I'll make you something else. That that's always really bizarre to me because as a kid, when I was a kid, what my mom made for dinner, that's what was for dinner. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Um, you didn't eat, you went hungry. And as a kid, I was a real picky eater. And to be fair, to this day, I'm not nearly as picky, but I'm still, for an adult, I'm pretty picky. Um, And my mother, as I was a child, she'd always say the same thing to me, my older brother, and my older sister. Well, if you don't like what I made for dinner, you can make yourself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I guess, that was like, for all the rest, me and my siblings going, well, I certainly don't want to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So I guess I'll just eat what, mom made and, at least as much of it as I can stand to eat, whatever the case was. And who knows, maybe the meals were delicious. I don't remember. I can honestly say some were not, but, but most were just fine. But yeah, it always went on. My mother, same threat. Well, if you don't like what I made for dinner, you can have yourself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, finally, when I was about 6 or 7, I I didn't look at it as my mother was bluffing me. I looked at it as, oh, she's presenting me with an option. Well, great. Well, then I'll go with the option of making myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I went to the pantry, got the bread, got the peanut butter, got the jelly. And I remember I got a paper plate because I could reach that. And I made myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I brought the paper plate with the sandwich on it back to the dinner table. And before I could even reach for the sandwich, my mom snatched the paper plate with the sandwich on it and threw it across the room and started yelling at me. What I made for dinner is what you're gonna eat. That's the end of it. And I remember she started pounding her index finger on the table, saying, you're gonna eat what I make. You're gonna eat what I tell you to eat. And of course, I was a bit angry, but I was very confused. Again, I was 6, 7 years old, and I didn't understand the concept of bluffing or calling somebody out on a bluff. I just thought, oh, she's presenting me with an option. So I was confused as to, well, if she presented me with this option, why is she now taking the option away? It didn't make any sense to me. Whereas, again, a lot of my friends now with their kids, they're like, oh, you don't like this? Oh, okay, well, I'll make you a grilled cheese sandwich. Or, oh, you don't like this? Oh, okay, well, I'll boil up some, spaghetti noodles for you and put a little butter on it. You can have that. And I'm like, wow, That's interesting because I sure as hell never had that option as a kid. And my daughter, thank goodness, she was never a picky eater. Not really. I mean, most kids to a degree are picky eaters. My daughter was not. She was always very laid back, very mellow, very go with the flow when it came to just almost everything, including meals. Now, to be fair, I would typically make meals that were kid friendly. Frozen pizza, hamburgers on the grill, hot dogs on the grill, barbecue chicken on the grill, maybe some kind of a sausage like Italian sausage with spaghetti or bratwurst and sauerkraut or kielbasa, something like that, tacos, something that most kids are cool with eating or just flat out really enjoy. I never would like try to go nuts and be like, oh, honey, I know that you're 4 years old, but I made Peking duck. I didn't do that. I kept it simple and for the most part kid friendly. But it's funny because my daughter now, which is probably why she's in culinary school, she loves that fancy pantsy stuff now. I mean, she likes, the typical stuff too, but she loves eating duck and lamb chops and fish and all kinds of stuff that, maybe I don't enjoy eating, maybe I do. But most of it I don't, but she loves it, and it's like, oh, okay, great. Um, she has a dare I say much more mature palate than I do, or more accurately more advanced palate. That's a better way to put it. She's got a much more advanced palate, but she was always very laid back. Even as a baby, she never cried. She really didn't. I mean, the only time she would ever cry is if she woke up from a nap or first thing in the morning, and that was to let me know I'm awake. Come get me, change my diaper, I'm awake, and that's it. I go and get her, change her diaper, change her clothes, whatever the case may be, and she would immediately stop crying, and she was totally fine. Um, and when she got a little older, same thing, totally laid back. If she were to ask me, "Dad, can I have a soda?" And if I were to say, "Well, no, honey, you just had a soda like an hour ago. If you're thirsty, you can have a glass of water." She would, oh, okay, that was it. That was like there was no arguing with her. It was just very, like I said, very mellow, very laid back, and Daddy, can I get some ice cream? No, honey, you just had some ice cream, and you're not going to have more ice cream, oh, okay, that was it. I'm like, geez, this kid's awesome, man. It's so easy. Um, Now, my stepson, who I've mentioned before in previous episodes, he's actually my stepson from my first marriage. I've known him since he was 3. He's now 26. He and I are still close. And I'm not saying that my daughter's better than him or he's better than my daughter or whatever. They're just different. There's a lot of things about them that are just different. And my stepson, he was a very picky eater when he was a kid, when he was little, very, very, very picky eater. And to a degree, just like myself, he kind of still is. But as a child, he was the pickiest eater I'd ever met at the time. Um, he didn't like anything. I mean, you would say, here's some spaghetti. He didn't like it. Here's a hamburger on the grill. He didn't like it. The only thing he really liked was like cut up hot dogs and like chicken nuggets that you put in the oven or whatever. That's all he really liked. Other than that, he didn't want anything. He was a real picky eater, and I would try to be logical with him and tell him, dude, you got to eat this. You got to get protein in you, and healthy, and the proper vegetables or whatever. And again, my daughter had no problem with this, but he did. And again, I'm not saying that she's better than him. That's not what I'm saying. But facts are facts. He was a picky eater, and I remember one time in particular. This is when I was still married to my first wife. Um, it was knowing that he's such a picky eater. Um, we went to her mother's house, my ex-wife's, and it was Thanksgiving, and we made my stepson a deal and said, "Hey, man, we're going to give you just a little spoonful of everything, just a little spoonful. I mean, a mouse could eat this. Okay, you have to eat it all. Now, you can have seconds, thirds, whatever. That's fine. But what we give you to eat initially, you have to eat. Okay, or else no dessert. Knowing how much he loves desserts, you will get no dessert if you don't finish at least what we initially give you. And at the time, he was I think he was 7 at the time. I think because my daughter Sky was a baby. She was an infant. She was like a little over a month old. And he was like, "Oh, okay." And I said, "All right, we have a deal. We get to my ex-wife's mother's house, and well, my wife at the time, and we told her, hey, here's the deal. If he doesn't eat what we give him to eat, no dessert, end of story." And she's like, "Oh, okay." Well, dinner came, and we gave him just the tiniest amount of food, which again, you can have seconds, thirds, fourths, whatever, but you have to at least eat this. He chose not to. And then I reiterated to him, both of us did, that, okay, well, then no dessert. You remember the deal we made? He's like, yeah, I know, but I can't eat this. My stomach hurts. That was always his excuse. That was always, he felt that was his get out of jail free card was, well, my stomach hurts. I can't eat anymore. My stomach hurts. Okay, fine, no dessert. And then fast forward about, I don't know, a half hour, 40 minutes later, something like that. He walks up and goes, "Grandma, can I have some dessert?" And she's like, "Oh, of course you can. Let me get you a slice of pie." And this is, we had already told her he is not to have dessert unless he finishes his meal. And she knew he did not finish his meal. And she was very much undermining our authority over him. And we immediately got in her face and said, "You are not to give him dessert. What did we tell you? We made a deal with him," and so on and so forth. And she said, and I quote, "This is my house. And if he wants to have dessert, then he gets dessert." No, because we're the parents. We are the ones who have authority over him, not you. And it became this whole thing or whatever. And we ended up leaving and all that ugliness. And then there was another time where I think I made spaghetti and meatballs or something like that. And again, my stepson didn't want to eat it. And I'm sitting there trying to be reasonable with him, logical with him. And he just was like, "I'm not eating this. I can't eat this, blah, 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 blah." And my ex wife, literally started force feeding him. She literally is like, "I'm so sick of this. I'm so sick of this crap." And she picks up, his little fork and he was probably 5 at the time, and just started shoveling this spaghetti in his mouth. She's holding his face with one hand and shoveling food in his mouth with the other. And I'm telling her that's not a good idea. He could choke. Stop doing that. Okay, you're still doing that. You're not listening to me. Literally stop doing that. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you, stop doing that. And he's crying his eyes out. And I was like yelling at her to stop doing that. And sure enough, he ended up throwing up all over the floor, all over the table. And then she gets mad because he threw up. I said, "Well, you can't force feed him. I mean, that's like child abuse. You can't do that." So funny. Well, it wasn't funny at the time, but in retrospect, it's like, Jesus, God, he was such a picky eater. But a great kid, total sweetheart of a kid, still is. I mean, well, he's not a kid now; he's an adult, but he's a total sweetheart. Love him very, very much. Um, and just a real picky eater, real picky eater. And another thing that my parents sure as heck didn't do, and I don't think other parents did it either with like my friends and stuff, was put us in a quote unquote reality bubble, end quote. It was like, this is the real world, this is real life. um, you're just going to have to deal with it and start dealing with it at an early age so that you're going to be ready for what life is going to throw at you, good and bad. Where there's so many kids now, including my stepson when he was little, that he was put into this little bubble. And I hated that. It's like, this is a really, you think you're doing him a favor. You're not. You're going to be hurting him, because once he gets out, like with school and stuff like that, his schoolwork is going to suffer, because he's too used to this idea of, if there's something I don't want to do, I shouldn't have to do it. And if there's something that I want, I should simply have it. that was his reality, but that's not the reality of life and the world. And I said, he's going to get to school. His grades are going to start to suck. He's going to be bullied by the other kids because his social skills suck, and sure enough, on and on like that. And sure enough, when he started school in the first grade, especially the first grade, everything that I said that was going to happen down to the letter happened. Everything. And I was like, told you so, told you so, told you so. And that's not good. You're not doing so. Anybody out there who is, trying to protect their child from the way the world is, you're not doing them any favors. You're actually hurting them because you're not allowing them to prepare themselves for what life really is, what reality really is. And I know this is a controversial, well, can be a controversial thing where people say, I don't think that children should be made aware of or exposed to. I hate that word exposed in this context, but that there's people out there who are gay and people out there who are transgender and so on and so forth. I don't want my child exposed to something like that. And I say to them, why? That's reality. There's people of all kinds of different colors, creeds, sexual orientations, whatever the case may be. All of us, we all exist. So why would you shield them from that? Because then the time comes where they, God forbid, they're like, 20 years old and they meet someone who's gay or transgender or something. And then they make the huge mistake of looking and treating them like they're some kind of a freak, which in fact they're not. They're just a human being like all of us are, but hey, I guess I know I have no right to tell people how to raise their children, but I do have the right to have an opinion about it. And that is my opinion. And, but going back to my childhood, and again, compare to the kids of today. And I don't want to do this back in my day crap. But it is true. I mean, my wife and I often joke about it, and we kind of touched base on it when Jen was a special guest on the podcast, where when we were kids, we would get up, eat a bowl of cereal, and Saturday morning perhaps watch some cartoons or whatever, and then we jump on our bikes and we go wherever and see which one of our friends can play, and maybe we can get a bunch of friends together to play and have fun. And our parents had no clue where we were. We didn't leave any notes. Cell phones didn't exist. We were just doing whatever we were doing and having a ball doing it. And we would come home maybe for lunch, unless we were at a friend's house where their parents were kind enough to like make us a sandwich too or something like that. And then of course we'd come home for dinner. But there was a good like 7, 8, 9, hell, maybe even 12 hours where, our parents had no idea where we were. But back then it's like, oh, this is totally normal. Whereas nowadays, oh my God, there'd be choppers in the air, SWAT teams would be called, there'd be police dogs sniffing and combing the area and everything. I mean, people are calling their kids cell phones, all kinds of stuff. I mean, people would lose their mind if that kind of thing went on today. And like I said a moment ago, we get on our bikes and we go to our friend's house. Hey, can you play? Let's get on your bike. Let's ride around, see if so and so can play, and all these other people, and we can all play together. Whereas now, parents have to meet the kid that you want to play with. They have to meet the kid's parents. They have to get to know them a little bit. They have to come to the house and make sure that, is this a house I want my child spending time in and all this other crap. And then we'll organize a play date. Okay, well, how about if my son or daughter comes over at like 2 p.m, sometime after lunch, and then I'll pick them up around 4. It's like, what happened to spontaneity and just fun? Why does everything have to be a freaking schedule? And some people make the argument, like my mother, she'll say this too, where it's like, well, there's a lot more weirdos out there nowadays than there were, say, 40 years ago. It's like, I find that hard to believe. I don't know, and neither does anybody else, but I find that hard to believe that there's more weirdos out there now than there were, let's just say, back in 1983. All right. The difference, though, this is a fact, is that the internet didn't exist back then. You didn't have to register yourself as a sexual offender, or whatever the hell that term is, or whatever. You didn't have to do that back in the 80s, whereas nowadays you do. And so it's like, oh my God, see all these weirdos? They weren't here 40 years ago. There's a very good chance that they were. Maybe not those specific people, but those numbers. There's a very good chance that those numbers still existed back then. It's just that you didn't know because there was no internet. Hell, there wasn't even a child services until like 1990. Prior to 1990, give or take a year, you could beat the crap out of your kids. And it's just like, well, that's how they choose to raise their kids. Whereas now that's criminal. You can't do that. And that's why I hate hearing people older than me, like my parents or people my parents' age, who will say things like, well, back in my day, that's just how it was. And that's why I still firmly believe in those values because that's how I grew up. Bullshit. That's a horrible, horrible excuse. Okay, first of all, it's not your day anymore. And guess what? It's not my day anymore either. It's my daughter Sky's day and people roughly her age. It's their day nowadays. It's not my day, and it sure as hell is not people who are of my parents' age's day. And when they say things like, well, yeah, well, back in the 50s and 60s, that's just how it was, and you just accepted it, well, that's cute. But you don't need to accept that bullshit anymore. So stop hiding behind that crap. And it's just sad and quite frankly makes me angry when people say, well, that's how I grew up. That's how things were back then. That's just what was accepted back in those days. It really angers me because when people say that, I think to myself, okay, that means you just were too lazy to question authority. And I don't mean be a rebel, but at least question your parents' authority and ask, well, why is this so important? Why is this a rule? What makes this so important to you that I need to follow this rule? I mean, not be a smartass, but a heart-to-heart conversation about it. You were either too lazy to do that, and you were so happy just being a sheep, you know, uh, in that also you wouldn't or you were just comfortable. You were either comfortable with it and you're just lazy, or you just accepted it. Either way, you were either a lazy ass or you were a sheep, not caring that you're just, I don't need any thoughts of my own or any opinions of my own. I'll just simply blindly follow, you know, this person of authority, whoever that is. There's nothing wrong with questioning authority in most scenarios. I mean, if you have a job or something, that could be different depending on how much you value your job. But yeah, so it's like that is complete crap. And like my mother, and I know a lot of other people's parents did this as well, where they would say, well, I don't want you to do this. And God forbid if, a kid, my age back in the 80s or 90s or whatever would say, hey, why? And they say, because I said so. Again, that's a bullshit answer. That either says, I can't think of a better answer to give you, so I'm just going to say because I said so, or you don't deserve enough respect from me to explain to you. Either way, I don't go for that shit. Okay? I don't go for that. It's like, no, give me a reason. Make it make sense to me. Show me the proper respect that you want me to show you, mom or dad or whoever is in authority, and explain yourself. Okay? Show me that respect. Whether I agree with it or not, show me that respect. Do that and then say, whether you like it or not, I expect you to follow this rule. But at least give me an explanation. I have never done that to my stepson or my daughter ever. If they were to ask me why, I would tell them because you could get hurt, or because, you're annoying me, or something in between. I would always give them some reasoning behind it, whether it was what they wanted to hear and they accepted or not. I never said, well, because I said so. Oh, cut the crap. It's like, well, back in my day, that's just what you did and all this stuff. And yeah. And you know what? It wasn't until the 1980s that women couldn't even get credit cards in their own name. It had to be under their husband's name or some other man. Okay. So don't give me this back in the day crap, because back in the day sounded like it was a real shitty time. People not having equal rights because of their color of their skin. And like I said, women not being able to get their own credit cards, women only being able to get certain jobs because certain jobs belong, quote unquote, belong to women, and certain jobs, quote unquote, belong to men. I don't buy into any of that shit. I'm all about equality. So don't even dare to try to stick that, well, back in my day, it was so much more wonderful. No, it's from what I've heard, it sounded like it sucked. So shut the fuck up and keep that crap to yourself. But yeah, people love to hide behind that stuff. Don't get it. Don't get it. I guess maybe it makes life that much easier for them, or they feel as though they don't have to explain themselves. And, granted, they don't. They don't have to explain themselves. There's plenty of times where I get into not necessarily an argument, but a disagreement with somebody, and they'll ask me why. And out of respect, I will say, this is why. Whether you agree with it or not, this is why. And if they ask, well, that doesn't make any sense, why do you feel that way? Then I start getting irritated and I say, you know what? I don't have to explain myself to you. The fact that I am explaining myself to you to begin with is showing you respect. Okay. But I'm not going to keep answering, I'm not going to keep coming up with answers until you hopefully accept one. Okay. And then everything's fine. No, you asked for an explanation. I gave it to you. If you don't like it, tough shit. Be glad that I showed you the respect enough to actually give you a reason. But well, back in my day, shut up. Okay. And even with me, I never pull that back in my day crap unless I joke about it. And like, even like with going out and being spontaneous, like I said a few minutes ago or whatever it was, the downside to that is we could have been killed and our parents would never know about it. It's like, hey, has anybody seen your brother? No, I haven't seen him in like 3 days. It's like, well, Jesus Christ, he might be dead. Yeah, I might. That's the downfall. And, again, Jen and I have joked about that too, saying, Jesus, man, things weren't exactly perfect in our day either, because we could have been killed, 8 different ways from Sunday, for God's sake, Um, but it's just different. It's just different, and I don't pull that. Back in my day, things were so much better because, yeah, I mean, some things I think are a little bit more fun, but maybe that's just because that's how I grew up. That's what I was used to. That was the norm. Just like the generation that came before me, it's like, well, that's what I was born into. That's what I was used to, and that's fine. But don't try to shove those ethics into my face. Just like I'm not going to try to shove my ethics into people who are 20, 30 years younger than me. I'm not going to throw my ethics in their face, because that's not their norm. Okay, that's not what's acceptable to them. And again, I grew up, especially in the 90s, with my mother's third husband, my second stepdad, and the two of them, quite frankly, couldn't stand each other. Could not stand each other. They just constantly fought, argued. There was so much yelling and screaming and threats going on in the house. And that was from like my age 12 to 24. And I finally moved out. And I was just like, oh my God, you know, I can't take this screaming and yelling and just them not getting along. And that was the norm in the house. And I hated it. And so when someone says, well, this is how I grew up, so this is why I act this way, because these are the ethics my parents put on me. So I have taken those ethics and now I put them towards my children. Well, guess what? My norm was my parents screaming at each other and screaming at me. And if I did something wrong as a child, I'd get hit. Sometimes I get hit a lot. Sometimes I'd get punched and even given the belt. That's what I grew up with. But did I take that and say, well, now I'm going to apply this to my stepson and my daughter? No, I don't yell at either one of them. I don't hit them. I've never once hit either one of them. So don't give me this. Well, that's how I grew up. That's what I'm used to. And that's why, no, you're full of shit. You are full of shit. You're hiding behind these bullshit morals, these bullshit esoteric morals that have no value today. Okay. And I wish, not that I'm brilliant and I'm perfect. I'm not, but I got to tell you, I wish there was a lot more people out there who was just as smart as I am when it comes to some of these things. Um, in my opinion, of course. But anywho, gang, as always, please, throw me an email out of pop culture. My phone timer went off. Out of pop culture bounds at gmail.com. Like I said, I think it was in the last episode that I have received a few more emails, and I am working on those. Don't think I read them. I have read them. For those of you who wrote me, I did read them, and I'm trying to put them in together in a way that is going to be fun and entertaining, hopefully, or at least make someone go like, "Oh yeah, dude, I totally hear what you're talking about." So again, out of pop culture bounds at gmail.com. I am, let's just call me Chris, and I look forward to talking to you guys on an episode later than now. Later, gang.